All right, we are live. It's time for Full Stack again. Welcome to Full Stack March 2021. And hopefully, we're coming to the end of having to do these virtually. I'm excited to actually see everyone in person again once that time comes. And I do believe it's going to come soon. So I'm looking forward to that. But before that happens, we're going to try to do these virtual things as best we can. So I'm glad you're here. Glad you're bearing with us. Glad you're trying this experiment with us. We've been trying it over a few months, and so far it's working pretty good. And one thing I would like to encourage you is if during tonight you have questions or comments or anything like that, please be sure to leave them on the YouTube replay or the chat area. We can see those as you're putting them up. So if we see something that's relevant or important, then we'll highlight that and answer those questions for you. So thanks for showing up. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on intro because I'm excited to hear what our guest has to say today. Some of you may know I work at a company called Planning Center, and one of my coworkers and friend is named Michael Chan. He's Chantastic. I'm going to bring him in here. Hey, Chan, welcome.
Hey, what's up? Cool
How you
transition,
doing?
by the way.
yeah, that was all me, hand drawn.
Doing good. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
Good.
So yeah, we can't work in the office together anymore, but we're like in the same city, and it seems weird that you're just on the other side of the city, and I haven't seen you in forever. So it's good to see your face again, even if it's virtual.
Same. Good to see you too.
Yeah. All right. So tonight, as you may have seen on the meetup invite, we are talking about ES modules, and that's something that we were talking earlier. You've learned a lot during this process of even just going through and learning yourself, and I'm excited to see what you have to present to us. So I'm not going to do a whole lot of intro. I'm going to just hand it over to you and see what you got for us.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Gio, and thanks for putting this on. I'm excited to do this. It's been a while since I've done anything with Full Stack. I can't even remember when the last. It was definitely in person, so it's kind of fun to do it virtually before you go back into the in-person ones.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm
cool.
excited for that.
Well, do you want to put my screen up and we'll start going? Awesome. Cool. Okay, so if you have questions, just add them as Gio mentioned. If you have a question as we're going through, type it in, and Gio will try to curate those and make sure that I see them, and try to be as responsive as possible to any questions that you have. Other than that, my goal is that in 30 minutes we should have a pretty strong understanding of all of the features that ES modules have and how to leverage them. First, a little bit about me. My name's I go by Chantastic or Chan. I host a show called React Podcast. If you listen to that, you might recognize this vocal setup here. And I'm starting a new thing. It's called lunch.dev, and it's just a bunch of courses that I have created around React and JavaScript. And this material that I'm going to show you tonight is actually part of a new series that I'm doing called Everything But the React. And I think it should be really helpful in helping you write React that is really well isolated, composable, and all the good stuff. Anyway, lunch.dev is where I am doing that. We have a Discord, and I have kind of a funny link for it, but it's events.lunch.dev/Discord. You can go there. You can hang out with us. We have a ton of stuff. We're always streaming locally inside of Discord. It's a ton of fun. A lot of great people in there. So yeah, that's that. These are some of the upcoming events that we have at events.lunch.dev. Now, today, we're going to be focusing exclusively on ES modules, just ES modules, and specifically what you can do with ES modules in Node 14. I think most of this works in 13, but specifically the latest version of Node 14. Now, if you want access to this little tutorial, you can get it on my GitHub. It's github.com/chantastic/ES module-reference-course. There you go. And this is the exact, you can just I pushed 6 minutes ago. This is exactly the state of what we're going to be working from tonight. So if you want to follow along, you can clone this and just kind of have a little bit of fun with it. So let's close that because we're not going to need that anymore. So we have 13 assignments that I want to run through today that will give us an opportunity to see all of the things that we can do with ES modules. So we might run a little bit over. I think if I'm not mistaken, these are actual features. So like let's say like 1 through 11, and then these are a little bit more like kind of things that you might want to know as they pertain to like actually building modules or like bundling them together. Okay, so first thing, we're going to cover this project setup. Right now, there's like, as you saw, there's like a README that helps you understand everything. There is an index.js file, which we're in right here. And in our package JSON file, we have a couple of preset scripts. There's start, which is just going to run npm watch, and that's going to watch our whole subdirectory for changes and re-output anything that we have in index.js. And then after that, we have, well, that's the watch script. That's the actual thing command that's being run. And then we have a build script. And this is later on going to emulate what you can expect from a bundler like rollup, and how it will behave with certain module commands. So that. That's what we got. Okay, so that's a project overview. We're gonna run npm start now. Oh, and I forgot. There is one. Let me show you one other thing. We have a modules directory, and in there, if you decide to kind of play around with things later, there's a bunch of examples of different types of like modules with different types of exports that you can use. In this case, we're going to specifically be using assignment because it's empty, and we'll be typing everything from scratch. So we got our little node watcher here. And first things first, I just want to import a module from the file system. So I'm going to use for that the import keyword, and we use a space and then just give it a path. Pretty simple so far. So that's going to be a relative path to modules slash assignment dot mjs. Okay, you guys can't play right now. Sorry. Family stuff. I'm pulling double duty tonight. Okay, so import keyword string to a relative path. We can, go into our subdirectory here and use this assignment file. Now we're using the MJS extension because we're working in a Node environment, and Node, if you want it to be interpreted as a module, you have to use the MJS extension. Otherwise, it's going to expect the required JS type of syntax. So let's put something in this module. And okay, so first we did that. So we imported a module from the file system. Great, killer. First one's done. Okay, we got no errors. Everything worked. We can try to import something that doesn't exist, like a .js file, and we would see that this is actually in fact working because we're getting an error otherwise. So that's great. So let's go to our second thing, which is I want to make this module leaky. Now you're probably like scared, like, oh my gosh, I heard that leaky abstractions are bad, and they can be. But I want to illustrate to you that modules do have a way of leaking things into the global. So, and these are called side effects, module side effects. So let's take a look at module side effects. A side effect could be something like anything that targets the environment in which it's going to be run directly. So something like this might be console.log. Let's see, assignments.js, MJS is loaded. Hit save on that, and we see that that logged to the console, even though we didn't specifically run that code. Because side effects leak out of the module and get run at import, this is going to run anytime we import this module. It's going to run. Now if we don't import the module, then it doesn't run, obviously, but if we do, it runs. I can't right now, sorry. Do I have to eat all my dinner? I ate yes, or you can eat most of it, that's fine. Fun times tonight. Okay, so another thing that you'll notice is that we can also do global assignments. So the global in a node environment is global. We can do global.leak and assign something to it directly. So this Leak is now everywhere. Okay. So in here, even though we've not imported this code, we can access the global leak console, log that out, and there it is. So this console.log, this global access, both of these have kind of transcended that module isolation barrier because modules allow for effects to be run on import. It's a feature, and as you get into like kind of hairy stuff where you might need to, I don't know, monkey patch an environment, or even just like stuff like this where you just want to load that, hey, get a notification that the module did in fact load. Um, you can do that kind of stuff here. A place that I see it a lot in modern code bases is, or specifically Webpack based things, is to import style sheets. So they'll utilize this style to import, some style sheet .css, and then through the magic of Webpack, have that kind of automatically load that CSS package into the onto the browser window. So anyway, that's a couple places you might see it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
So can you think of, when you import something, can you think of it basically just running from top to bottom on the file that you, or executing from top to bottom on the file that you imported?
Yeah, I would say in a couple ways, yeah. So definitely with these globals, for sure that's the case. Standard, if you're familiar with hoisting rules, those are still going to apply. So, if you define something that doesn't hoist, um, lower in the module than when you export it, and we'll kind of cover some of that a little bit later. Like that's not going to be defined by the time that it is exported. So yeah, I would say it's still important to remember the like kind of like order of execution.
Totally. Cool.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's move on. So we made this temporarily leaky. That's a good thing. We can kind of close that up now. And I want to, before we go too far, I want to show you that there is a second syntax for importing a module. So that second syntax is a dynamic syntax. And literally the only difference is that instead of the space, you use these parentheses. Now, there's a couple advantages to a dynamic import, and there's a couple things that you need to kind of keep in mind. So first of all, I changed this to a dynamic import, and then look what happened. Undefined. So what we had before was, assignment.mjs is loaded. That's this console.log line. Actually, no, I'm sorry. That one still runs. Okay, so this actually does tie into that question about order, right? So this still runs, but before that, we get this undefined. And that's because this console.log, because this is dynamic, it takes just subtly longer to resolve this. And it moves on to this line next. It executes it. But because this hasn't been loaded yet, this global leak isn't defined. Kind of interesting. Now we can solve this because like this is really just these import statements, these dynamic import statements are just promises. So in Node, we can do, if we want to solve this, we can do a global await, which is going to wait for this import to fully resolve before trying to execute that line. And then that does, in fact, fix the load order that we had. Another way to do this is we can, do this with by chaining on a then. We would take, because it doesn't really matter. We don't have to take anything, but only after the thing was effectively imported would we try to access this global. That also works. So this is another way to import code. And one of the primary benefits that I see is, obviously the main benefit is that you can lazily load um, uh, in, lazily load imports, which is a really beautiful thing. The more we talk about performance, the more we don't want to like just push a whole application down the line, but break it up into chunks that we can import dynamically. And this is a great way to do that. But in addition to that, we can also change the actual import to be dynamic. And this is not something that we can do with a static import. we can change this. Actually, I won't change it too much, but I will just interpolate that value out to be, oh, undid one too many times. Do that. Ooh. Modules. Oh, it's got to be a string. Assume this was a variable or something like that. I guess I can change that. So let my module equal. Cool. And so now we've made that a fully dynamic. We don't even know which module we're going to import at the time that we import it. Pretty cool, pretty cool, pretty cool. And this is actually really handy. I'm not going to type it all out, but this is really handy for, say if you want to do something just when you're in a dev environment, just load this module in a dev environment or just load it in production. This is a really nice way to do that too, because you can't wrap a static import inside of a conditional. Okay. So that is that. Now we're finally going to get into this point where we're actually adding legitimate code to this module, and I'm going to just do a couple things. So we'll say let. Actually, let's do a function first. The function. We'll define a greet function and return. I guess take like subject and return. Oh, if I can do it. Hey, subject. And let's do one more. Let's do one more variable just for fun. So like let. I'm gonna hide these two. Let default subject equal there. So if we don't pass anything into this, we'll do default subject. This is mostly just to get another variable in there.
Just point out your subject and it's misspelled. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, cool. So we have two things now. We have a default subject, and then we have a function that greets that subject. So let's go back over to our import. We're going to kind of hide all that. We might go into that later again. But for now, we're just going to say we're going to use our static imports for modules assignment.mjs. That's going to import the module. And then let's just try to access those functions and see what happens. So we have a default subject. Let's run this greet function. We'll call greet, and then it gets a default anyway. But then we have this problem. Okay, so cannot find module. I misspelled that. That's not the error that we were expecting. Okay, cool. So greet is not defined. We don't have a greet defined. And that's because while these globals, while these side effects leak out, every line of code, every assignment, every function declaration, these are actually isolated to the boundaries of the module. They can't escape unless we explicitly export them. Now, the export syntax that we're going to start with is my favorite to start with because it looks identical on both the export side and the import side. And this is an export list. Okay, we'll say export, and then we do these curly braces. It looks like an object, but I'm going to tell you right now, it is not. So you export, we use this block syntax for the list, and then we just provide all of our exports via this list. Or we just list all of our exports. So we're going to add greet to that list. And that's really all we need right now. Now, on the other side, we have to do the same thing. So we're going to use that block to say I want to import something from the export list. It's going to be greet. That's the function that I want. I'm going to export it from. So we add the block and then this from keyword. I'm going to import greet from the export list from this module. Hit save. And got to change one thing just to actually console log that. There we go. We see hey there. Now, you'll notice something really cool happened, right? We export only greet, which is cool, but greet, because it has access to default module, because it's in the same module, I don't also have to export default subject. It has access to it by virtue of being in the same module. So even though this is isolated and I can't access it, and I'll prove that to you right now, default subject, we'll try to pull that out. And then I'll actually just pass that back in. So it should still say, hey there. We're going to get an error because default subject, the requested module, assignment.mjs, does not provide an export named default subject. So on this side of the module, on the import side, this is inaccessible to us. It's isolated to this module. However, any code that we have in here can still access that. A beautiful, beautiful model of encapsulation right there. Now, so if we have additional things that we want to export, this list is just comma separated. So we're going to export default subject as well. Save that. And we see again, hey there. Pretty cool. Okay. So we did that. Covered export list. Oh, wow. We're just like knocking them down right now. How much time do I have? Probably not. Oh, we're in 20 minutes.
Just keep going, man. This is good stuff. Just keep going.
Okay, cool. We will keep going. You know what? I'm just gonna keep going until you tell me to stop.
That sounds like a good deal.
Okay. So now I had mentioned very briefly that these are in fact not objects, and I don't want you to trust me on that. I'm gonna prove it to you. So let's export some object. Actually, I'm going to try to do it in line first to prove it on the export side. Okay, so here I am going to just kind of put some additional inline object, which will be like, I don't know, name, some of my details. Fantastic. Okay. Now this I can't even export this. It's super unhappy. Unexpected token right here. So if this were an object, or exporting objects, this should work, right? Or I guess more so this should work, which it definitely doesn't. Unexpected string. Okay, so export side, not objects. Can't do this. These are export lists. Okay, I think the same thing. So let's try also on the import side. Let's create an object. So let my object name Fantastic. Add it to our export list. Object. Cool. Okay, so it worked on this side. We've added an object to our export list because it's just like a variable. It's just a declaration. It's just there. It's just code like the rest of it, and we can export it this way. Let's try importing it. My object. Okay, no problems there so far. But what if we wanted to, use object destructuring to try to access directly the name property off of this? Well, we might do something like, was it my object, use a colon, try to take name off of that. And you can see already our editor is not happy. I hit save, it's complaining about syntax. So these are not objects. They are export lists, and they are flat. So it's literally just a list of things, and you can add any declaration or variable to them in a flat way. Okay, we tried and failed on that one. Now, something that can be a challenge in code is that I've exported this greet function, right? So greet is exported. I can export greet here. But what if I have greet already defined in this particular module that I'm working in? So let's copy and paste that implementation to create an error. Okay, so now we have our exported greet function, which we're importing, but then we have a conflict because we also have a local greet function that's local to this index file. Let's see what happens. So we get an error as predicted. Identifier greet has already been declared. That's a bummer, but we did know that. So how do we fix this? Let's say that they are subtly different. So let's say this one says hi, and in this app we really need, or let's make it more dramatic. Salutations. Okay. And yeah, so we say salutations, right? And for some reason we need both of these, and we need them to be discrete. We need to use both of them. Well, I can rename things from my export list with this keyword as. Now, this is another way in which objects and export lists are different because there is no as in an object. So they say greet as, and we can do this however we want. This can be whatever, assignment as or assignment greet. Okay, so we can change this down here. Assignment greet. Okay. What error am I getting? Assignment greet is not defined. I probably just misspelled it.
Yeah, there's a capital M. There you go.
Thanks.
Sorry, I don't want to be that guy who pops in every once in a while and shows you all the
that's perfect.
mistypings you've been doing.
that's perfect. It's so many mistypings. So I could be looking at it for 5 minutes. I appreciate the assist.
No problem.
Okay, so yeah, so now we see that we have both of those. We see salutations there and hey there, which is really cool. This can really get us out of a bind if we need to import code from a library, but it conflicts with something that's already inside of a module that we're using, as we've seen here. Good stuff. Okay, so we learned how to alias or rename, and this actually works on both sides. So I can rename this on this side if I wanted to I don't know, let's call it greeting. I think it's a terrible name, but I need to name it something else. If I'm gonna export it as greeting, our code breaks again because this is no longer greet. We're going to import greeting, and we can still keep our local assignment over on this side. So really cool. Renaming things all over the place with as. This is not the only way. Export lists are not the only way that you can export code from a module. You can also export them inline. So let's do that. Say I don't care to Yeah.
Jan, before you delete that, can you export greet and then export greet as? Can you export it twice, just with different names?
Oh, like right up here?
Yeah, well, like so when you have export greet at the bottom, so not in 8. Can you do export greet as greeting and then also greet?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So almost like make an alias for your functions.
So greet as other greet, like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's do that. Okay, cool. So now we're taking the same function in both places, this greet function, and then we're going to export it both as greeting and other greet. These names are terrible. Like don't this is not a naming talk.
But Chan said to name it other greet.
So then here we can import other greet. What a terrible, it's even unsatisfying to say.
Yeah.
Other greet. Okay, and so now we have our
Awesome.
3 salutations, and then these are doing the same thing, which is great, which is what we want, right? Other greet, and then this assignment greet, which is being aliased from greeting, which is being aliased to greet. Man, there's a lot of steps in between there. Now, cool. But all of that works. Now, something that I'm actually curious about is, since we're I want to show this other way, which is to export a named export inline. And I'm curious, because we're exporting greet using greet as greeting and also as other greet, if we can just add the inline export keyword right here in front of function and also export greet. This is chaotic, but
I'm liking this.
So this is called a named export. And so for any of these, we can actually just add the export keyword in front. Now, You'll notice because of what we're doing here, the value of the export list is that we can change the name on export. This is not something that we can do when we export something directly, because where would we rename it? We're just going to export this function with the name that it already has. So we imported greet. We're going to do this one last, or let's see. So we gotta get rid of our inline greet, unfortunately, if we want to do that, or we can rename it, I guess. And so we see 3 hey there's. Pretty cool. So we're exporting using a named export, the raw function, but then using an export list, we're exporting that same function under 2 different names using the as renaming keyword. So much greeting. So that's using named exports inline. Okay, now there's one other type of export that you can do, and this is the default export. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually at this point going to just import something from a different module just for a second, and I'll bring that one up. It's default export. Now, this export or this module has one function inside of it. I'm using export with the additional default keyword stuck in there and doing what we just saw, exporting a function. This is generate MIT license. It takes a name, assumes a date, and puts those all together. So let's take what we've learned so far. We'll import from our module subdirectory default export.mjs. Now we want to import the default module from that. So we got to use our from keyword. Now, this is a little bit different. We're not going to use the curly braces because that's for either export lists or named exports only. Or not only. Actually, no. I'm gonna correct myself, because what we can do is we have our curly braces and we can export default off of this. Now we see an error because default is a keyword. We're actually using it right here, so we can't use default, and we're forced to say as gen MIT license called console.log gen MIT license right here. That's a function, so we got to call that, and it spits out an MIT license. Now there's no name, so I got to add that. Michael Chan. Save. Scroll down a little bit. What did I do? Did not work. Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah, MIT license, copyright C 2021, Michael Chan. So this worked. Now this is kind of ugly, right? Like default as, and it's kind of irritating because like we're gonna have to, anytime we use a default export, we're gonna have to use this kind of ugly syntax. Now, the nice thing about default exports is there can be only one default export. So there's a really handy syntax that you can do just by deleting all of this extra import code. You can see the thing just runs as it did before, because defaults can be exported directly from this module. So if you don't put the curly braces, it just assumes that you want the default export. And because the default export doesn't come with a name, but default, you can now rename it without having to rename it. Whatever, it's more like an assignment. Whatever you assign it to, that's the name of the thing. Super, super cool. Default exports are really nice. Now, I'm going to I'm going to provide a warning. We may or may not get to the justification for that warning. So I guess I just have to subscribe to lunch.dev and get that in the course. However, there is a lot of hate for default modules. Now, if you've been following along, you can see that default modules is no different than a named export, except that it gets a fancy import syntax. So there's nothing inherently wrong about a default module. The problem is the way that they get used. And if we get to bundling, we'll cover that. But default module is just a very special named export, or default export is just a very special named export. Okay, so I want to show you one other thing. We're going to go back to our assignment module that has kind of a little bit more complexity and nuance here. And so you do this. I'm going to show you how you can import all of a module's context into a single global or a single variable. So this is what this is going to look like. We're going to close this up. Say we're going to use star. We want to import all of the content, all of the exported contents from this module, and we want to import them into an object. So if you were just like, oh man, I'm really bummed that I can't use object syntax to destructure values out of my module. You can, you just got to do this. So we're going to import star from, let's see, import star as, we got to assign it to something. We'll call this, assignment module. Again, this is not instructive naming talk. And then here we were pulling those named exports in as functions directly before, and now we're just going to access them using property access on this object. Assignment mod dot rate. Oh, I did something wrong. Star as. Oh, right. So when I do this, I was renaming that thing before, right? So we were calling assignment.great, but now that's not what it was exported as. That was what we were renaming it to. So we'll call, let's see, we had other greet and greeting.
I'll also point out that default subject also needs to be with assignment mod.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Default, oh, sorry, assignment mod. Thank you, Geo. Saving the day. Okay, cool. Yeah, Geo saved us from a good minute and a half at least of debugging there, because he reads the errors. Read the errors, kid. Okay, so we have those working again. Now, this is actually, I'm not gonna lie, this is like the creme de la creme of imports in my mind. Now, it's so great because no matter what, I retain some of this module isolation. I only have to worry about this one variable. Everything is tied to that, and I don't have to worry about conflicts, unless I don't know, do something silly like assign another variable with this same module import name or another object. So super cool. This is one of my favorite things to do, and it actually works really nicely with default export. We can put a comma here. This is a one-time use comma, and then before that, we can import the default function from that as well. So module default, and then I'm just gonna copy and paste. Actually, we can just do that same thing we did before. Export default greet, and we're making so much use of this one function. 4 times. Look at that. 4 exports of the same function. What have we done, Geo? What a day. What a day. So yeah, so we can still use that fancy default import as well as this. And to be honest, just in case you're curious, you can also use the export list syntax here. Um, and this doesn't repeat. You can't just like add more commas and import more times. It's kind of just that one time where you can use the default export before it. Okay. I think that's it. Let's see. We did imports. We'll maybe skip the dynamic stuff. Just know that when you import a module dynamically, it automatically does this thing where it kind of turns it into an object, because you don't have any means of. It doesn't mean anything to like you don't have access to rename something inside of a dynamic import outside of having it as an object. So keep that in mind. One last feature. So this is a legitimate feature, so I am obligated to show it to you. we're going to import that. What did I show you? The MIT license, Gen MIT license. From what was it? Default export.mjs, default export.mjs. Do that. Okay. Now we could import it and export it in 2 different lines, right? But I want to show you one last thing where we can actually export this directly from another module. It totally just passes it through. So we're going to export default as gen MIT license. Nope, we got to do this. Okay, so from this default export, we're going to export the default as gen MIT license. Now, we can reach for this through our module. We can call assignment mod gen MIT license. Michael Chan. Oh man, I was really hoping that just worked right away.
Would have been sweet.
It's the default.
No, line 1. I don't think you have the from. You have a mod rom instead of a mod from.
What did I do? How did I delete that?
And then there's a rom after mod on that import.
Oh, deleted that F and joined.
F was gone.
Joined without a space. Okay, cool. Yes. So now this is part of the assignment mod gen MIT license. What have I done? Let's see. The request module assignment does not provide export default. I'm not using the export default. I'm trying to import it and it doesn't exist. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, cool. So we got our we got our MIT license. We got Geo Lessel MIT license. And there we go. So yeah, I think that's just about it. Unless let's just jump to questions. Geo, if there were any questions, and then maybe if if any of the follow-up stuff ties into a question, we can kind of show it off.
Yeah, one of the things that I did not know, I think, was your first thing was the dynamic imports.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually very interested in you going over 11 to see what you could do with dynamic imports.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
Would you mind hitting that?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so so this is kind of what we were. I think this is. Let me try to find like the clearest example we can right now. Okay, so we have import star as assignment mod, right? And then we're using console.log assignment mod gen MIT license. So we're calling that function through this object that we've assigned. Okay, now so let's make this dynamic. So first of all, what does this even look like if we're going to import it dynamically? We're going to let's dupe that line and then change this to be a dynamic import. And then I'm just gonna keep the syntax easy and just await the I can't do that. So I'm gonna have to call then. We're going to add our function block that's going to run once this import promise resolves. And this area right here is where we get our actual module, back. So we can assign this to just keep all the code running smoothly. We can assign that to assignment mod and then move this code up into this statement. And we see that we get this same, the same output. Now, what about the other parts of this? So these, how can we access those? So do that. And again, because this is an object in the same way that we were accessing it, as through star as, these are equivalent. Now I can kind of just move all of that code up in the same way. Now, it's worth noting that this is in fact an object. So if we want, we can, let's kind of change this up a little bit. Let's just take greeting out. If we want, we can now destructure these off of this object. So gen MIT license and greeting. And then we can use object syntax to rename that my greet. I haven't used my greet yet, right? So we'll change this to my greet. We don't actually need to do that. Okay, so did it run? Will it blend? Yes, in fact, it does blend.
That's cool. I don't think I've ever seen dynamic imports before.
Yeah, they're pretty cool, right? Yeah, it's interesting. It can be used in React. My understanding is that as of today, so I think there's an API that you wrap the promise with called like react.lazy. And then as of today, it only supports modules with default exports. So you can only support the default export modules. And I tend to have my modules with the named exports, and then I'll create an additional one that just kind of does that renaming thing where I'm going to import just the one that I want to kind of lazily load and then export that as the default just for that one module.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and so like one of the questions that always comes up is that for this import star as syntax, is that going to import the whole module? And I would prove it to you, but I think we're shy on time. Modern bundlers are typically smart enough to tree shake those module imports, and it will only import what you use in the code.
Nice. But if you imported them directly, would the tree shaking take them out if you didn't use them?
Oh,
your
that's
editor
a
should
good
probably warn you
question.
about that. But
yeah, I don't know. We'll have to explore that.
Yeah, cool. Next time you're on, you'll answer that question for us. 30 minutes on tree shaking. That could be interesting.
Yeah, so I overshot it a little bit. I overshot by like
fine,
12 or 15 minutes or something like that. But hopefully that was a fairly comprehensive introduction to all the cool things you can do with ES modules.
Yeah, it is cool. So obviously, like live coding is a difficult thing. So there's always stuff that comes up. So kudos on that.
Oh,
but
thanks.
you do that like more than most people because you have a stream, right? You do that occasionally on your stream.
Yeah, actually, I do from time to time. We were talking about this a little bit earlier today. Like I just, if I could, oh my gosh, I cannot find a single web browser that's that's close by.
You can expect this great content every day on Michael Chan's stream.
It's true.
Where is his browser?
It is a lot like this, to be honest. So youtube.com/c/Chantastic. That's my YouTube channel. And there's not really a lot of prepared video content, but I do a lot of stuff. I do a lot of live stuff there. And I try to do it at least once a week. And I'd love to do it more.
Nice. Well, what else you got going on these days?
Oh,
React podcasts.
Yeah, that's about it. So I do. I have React podcast. There are over 120 episodes now. So there's
That's
awesome. a lot of really great conversations with a lot of really incredible React developers. I've taken a hiatus. Possibly for the whole duration of like 2021. But there's a lot of great content. If you haven't listened to React podcasts, it's very possible that some of your favorite React developers have been on to have a conversation with me about some cool tech.
Yeah, some of that stuff will never get old. We could listen to. I'm on this like the retro computing kick right now. Obviously, React isn't retro computing at all, but I think you can learn a lot of stuff from. Oh, sorry, you can learn a lot of stuff from the computer scientists and the tinkers and the hackers that came before us.
Yeah.
So just because something was from 2-3 years ago doesn't mean it's not relevant to today. Some of the tech may have changed, like some of the syntax may have changed, but some of the ideas I think we've lost some of those ideas that were originally around years and years ago. It's good to go back to some of those.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so good. I mean, the sometimes like the older the better, right? Like all of this stuff kind of revolutionary right now is just the fruition of some idea that was germinating 30 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. We're going through a book right now, and we're talking about like Alonzo Church and all his like church notation for lambdas and how you can do everything without having actually any variables or numbers, and it's crazy stuff, man. But it's really cool. That was like theoretical, and they proved it. It was really neat.
That is, I mean, that's the wildest thing, right? I mean, like we're still kind of like proving some of like Einstein's theories, right? Like these things that people were like, you know what, mathematically this makes sense, and it's like, and then it's like, oh crap, like, yeah, like black holes do like come to like collide,
right.
and they make a sound, and like, yeah, it's crazy.
That's awesome. And can you go back a little bit over what lunch.dev is?
Oh yeah, for sure. So lunch.dev is it's actually a couple things right now. It is where I have some course material on like React and JavaScript. This whole modules thing will be added up there very shortly. And then I have another portion of that. There's a subdomain, events.lunch.dev. This is a good way to kind of like participate in our like Discord channel. So like, let's see, on this day we have a stream that's going to be in there just in Discord. Michael Jackson's going to be doing an introduction to Remix, which is a really cool a really, really cool framework for building websites, with some really interesting ideas. So we're always adding events. There's a lot of really cool stuff that I have learned. That stuff is actually on YouTube as well. Unfortunately, we don't have like a fancy domain, so it's kind of you'd have to like go through and find one of these of past events and then find the YouTube link that way. But yeah, they're all on there. There's some really cool stuff.
That's awesome. And so obviously you didn't like step out this morning and know all this stuff about ES modules and all these things. How do you learn? Like what are the resources you go to learn this stuff?
Yeah. So honestly, nothing that I have taught you tonight couldn't have been read quicker on the not mdn.com.
Just on msn.com. Here's the news.
Keep it honest. On MDN's modules, they have they split out the import and exports. This is not actually, so I think what we want is import. Search for that. And I guess if you can find it, that's the problem, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm,
yeah. So the cool thing is that they have a really fancy little kind of like cheat sheet here that shows you all of the things that are available. And if we go to export, if you go to export, you can see that there's even some kind of features that haven't been released yet. So there's a draft for export star as name from. I'm not totally sure when that would be useful, but it's coming.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's really good. I find that for a lot of these bigger techs like JavaScript and Node and like Phoenix, for example, Ruby, the documentation is just excellent typically.
Yes.
And so you and I have spoken at conferences before, and a lot of times when I'm trying to come up with an idea for a conference, I'll just find a module or some piece of the documentation that seems obscure, and I'll just read through the documentation and come up with a talk, So there's some good stuff in there that you can pull out and just experiment with. Like I love the idea of trying something, breaking it, trying to figure out how it works, and then fixing it, and then blam, you learn something.
Oh, absolutely.
You do your job on Monday.
It's I can't like overemphasize like what you've said about just like finding a document that you feel like people I haven't read and then
Yeah,
just copying it. Like this is like this. I still get a ton of traffic on this. I made this tiny little cheat sheet, and all it is just examples from, it's out of date by the way, but it's just examples from the documentation for all of like these React functions. And like, I mean, you could go there, but like a lot of people come here instead. So yeah, I like follow
perfect.
that advice, find some
Yeah.
obscure thing, read it, and then make some resource or talk or whatever from it.
So I'm going to turn that around and say, if you have, and you being the YouTube audience, if you have an idea for a talk, like seriously, hit me up, hit us up. We're always interested in random things people are learning. One of my favorites was a couple of years ago now, I guess, Katie came on and did a talk about just weird stuff she found in the Ruby standard library. Just like her favorite stuff that you would never use, but it's really interesting that it's in there. And there's obviously some use cases for it, but for us, like full stack devs, probably not much. But yeah, dig into something, come teach us, because like even if Chan and I read the same piece of documentation, we're going to understand it a little bit differently. Like everyone reads something a little bit different, they learn a little bit differently. So I may learn better by seeing a video, and Chan may learn better by listening to a podcast, and Katie may learn better by reading through documentation. So everyone knows something that they can pass on in a way that other people can understand.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you, Chan. I'm going to let you go unless you have anything else you want to.
Nope. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun, and I appreciate you helping me not just waffle around these areas.
That's the worst when you're live coding. You're like, it's like, I know it's here. It's here somewhere. I just don't know where it is. And everyone in the audience is like, it's right there. There's the error. All right, cool.
Thanks, Chan. I lost you.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I've got you still. So I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. It was perfect timing for you to lose me. It was not important. All right. Well, that's it for today's full stack. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. If you have questions like later, obviously this will be on YouTube for a while, for I guess till the heat death of the universe. Leave comments in the comment section of YouTube, and we'll check those. We get email notifications as those are coming in, and if there's something that we can come back and circle around to and answer for you, we'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, hit us up on Meetup. We are in the Southern California area, Carlsbad. And if you're local, hopefully we're going to be opening the doors back up and having these things in real life, real person-to-person interactions in our buildings again sometime soon, maybe within the six months or so. So that would be awesome. But of course, we'll still live broadcast these over YouTube, even if we have them in person. So thank you all for showing up. And again, hit those comments. I will let you know that we have a Slack it's super low, low volume. So it's not going to ruin your day if you join this. But there are like occasional questions that come up that we can answer. It's a huge, I'm sorry for that link. It's ridiculous. But take a picture of it and write it down, get it going. And we will see you in there. And if you have any sort of like hiring issues, if you're looking for a job, if you're offering a job in the Southern California area, then that's the place to be. Join us in Slack, and we can try to hook you up with someone who's hiring or who needs to be hired. So again, thank you. Good night, and we'll see you guys next month.